It took 2 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, 2 weeks for Brad Stevens, the new president of basketball operations for the Boston Celtics. Took him 2 weeks to make his first official move as an executive of the team after being its head coach. And in this move, he traded away Kemba Walker and the Celtics' first round pick in the upcoming draft to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Moses Brown, Al Horford, and the Oklahoma City Thunder's 2023 second round pick. And a lot of people are saying that this trade was horrible for Boston and that Brad Stevens did a really bad job. They don't understand why Kemba Walker is going and a first round pick is going. And realistically speaking, the reason why people don't like this trade for Boston is, no offense, they don't understand the quality and the level of the pieces that are in play for both teams here, specifically on the Boston side, because realistically speaking, the Oklahoma City Thunder are not trading for Kemba Walker. You know, Kemba Walker is the toy that you get in your Happy Meal from McDonald's. They are trading for the first round pick, which is the incentive, because the reality is that Kemba Walker is more likely than not going to play one game in an Oklahoma City Thunder jersey. And we'll get to that in a little bit here, but I wanted to start focusing first on the Celtics side of things, because as I said, a lot of people don't understand the level of the pieces that are in play here and why Boston is making this trade. And a lot of people didn't even know that you could make a trade at this time, but you can make a trade when you're eliminated from the playoffs, or even if you don't make the playoffs, you can make a trade. It's just a lot of teams don't do it because they like to see how things play out in the playoffs before they start making their moves. I said 2 weeks ago when Brad Stevens got pushed into the president of basketball operations role for the retiring Danny Ainge, I said that this hiring was genius. I said it was incredibly smart, not only for the fact that you get to keep Brad Stevens within the organization, because the reality is that whoever the general manager that was going to come in probably would have fired Brad Stevens based on the season that he had in Boston. So not only do you get to keep Brad Stevens within the organization, you don't have to go and see him coach either in college or for another professional basketball team. You get to keep him in the franchise, in the organization, and Brad Stevens knows that roster better than anybody else in the building. Brad Stevens knows that roster. He knows the players that are on it. He understands what they need and where they need to go. And because of that, Brad Stevens knew that Kemba Walker's days in Boston were numbered. Brad Stevens knew that Kemba Walker needed to be moved. And I think Kemba Walker even subconsciously knew that he needed to get out of Boston. You could see the unhappiness and the frustration that he had when the Boston Celtics were eliminated from the playoffs. He said he's just got to fix it. He's got to fix things about his games. Obviously, he's very unhappy about his knees and the injuries that he sustained in Boston. And overall, Kemba Walker's time in Boston was coming to an end, I think, anyways. And it was really just an unfortunate run for him and the Celtics. In his 2 years in Boston, Kemba played 99 games, averaging 20 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 1 steal, and 42% shooting. Now, obviously, stats don't tell the entire story, because if you look at his stats when he was in Charlotte, they're actually pretty similar. But his consistency, and to be quite honest with you, I think, that's his Achilles heel as a basketball player, is the fact that offensively speaking, he's not that consistent to begin with. But his consistency as a basketball player and his ability to stay healthy both tanked tremendously in his time in Boston. It was time to move on for Kemba Walker, and especially the Celtics, which signed, Kemba to a massive, massive contract, kind of as a panic signing to replace Kyrie Irving, who said, oh, hey, I actually don't want to play here anymore. And Kemba Walker, even though he's a little bit smaller than Kyrie he does check a lot of the same boxes that Kyrie did. So it made sense from a basketball standpoint to move Kemba Walker in. And on paper, it looked like that team would have been really, really good with Kemba. He just did not stay healthy. His knees are deteriorating, and it's taking a toll on his body. And again, the inconsistency offensively and his inability to stay healthy is what expedited his exit from Boston. Kemba missed more games in the past 2 seasons in Boston than he had missed in his entire career up until that point. So, not only is the offloading of Kemba Walker going to give Boston about $14 million in cap space, if I remember correctly, to make some additional moves to try and fix that roster, you are getting rid of, and I don't want to use the term getting rid of because that seems so harsh, but you are, let's say moving. You're moving a player that you knew was not going to be a good fit for the roster. And again, you are moving that first round pick as well, because not only is OKC going to initially take on that contract, but they're going to take on a player that they know is not going to play more than likely a single game in an Oklahoma City uniform. And if Kemba Walker does play any games in an Oklahoma City uniform, it's purely to raise up his trade value so Sam Presti, the general manager of the Oklahoma City Thunder, can move him and get more first-round picks, which Oklahoma City might own every first-round pick in the draft at some point over the next 3 years because they are hoarding first-round picks. So when you say, oh, I don't understand why Kemba and a first rounder is going to Oklahoma City for a 36-year-old center in Al Horford and Moses Brown, that's why. It's the fact that Kemba is a little injury prone right now. He's got a ginormous contract, and Oklahoma City is probably not going to play many games. He's not a long-term asset. So the first round pick really is sweetener for the Oklahoma City to incentivize taking on Kemba Walker and then moving him 1 year later, which Oklahoma City has been that place for a couple of years now. Think about what Chris Paul did. He came in, led that team to the playoffs in the bubble. 1 year, moved on to Phoenix, and now they're in the Western Conference Finals. So what this means for, Oklahoma City is the fact that, hey, Sam Presti is, round of applause for Sam Presti for getting all these first-round picks. This, even though it's been a rough going for Oklahoma City recently, ever since Westbrook left, ever since Durant left, he's done a really good job at slowly but surely accumulating draft picks to where, hey, they're going to have so many first-round picks over the next 5 years that it's almost a similar situation to what Boston was in, where they're going to have so many picks, they're going to have a lot of picks to, build their team around. Future is really bright in OKC, and you have the potential of getting even more picks from Kemba Walker, for dealing Kemba Walker, whether that's this offseason or next offseason. And you say, well, it sucks to let go of Al Horford. Al Horford was not playing significant minutes in OKC after being traded from Philadelphia. He was not being utilized by OKC. It makes sense for them to move on. Obviously, the one that probably stings, and Moses Brown is a name that you might not know off the top of your head, but OKC fans seem to really love the guy. So he's going to be a valuable addition for Boston. Boston is going to bring in Al Horford, who does have offensive capabilities, and he is going to strengthen up the interior defense, which was Boston's probably weakest aspect as a basketball team. The past season was their interior defense. And, Al Horford has had 3 seasons. I think he had 3 or 4 seasons with Boston, with Brad Stevens. So he's going to be returning home to a team that he knows very well. It's a great fit for Boston initially. It frees up about $14 million in cap space for them to go and, find somebody else to fill the holes that are currently in the Boston Celtics roster. And realistically speaking, Sam Presti has had himself set up to have more picks in the first round of the subsequent drafts, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, if they draft well, and that's a big if they draft well, in a draft class that actually appears to be pretty good this upcoming season. I know I've said I was skeptical about how good this draft class was going to be in the past. Watch out for OKC. So it accomplished a lot for Boston. Boston got a great centerpiece, probably a starting center in Al Horford, who can shoot the basketball somewhat efficiently, great interior defense, which he's going to be a big help for Boston moving forward. Boston got another young player that they can be excited about. They moved on from a player that was having a stranglehold in terms of money capabilities, in terms of the contract, and they freed up some cap space. And sure, they had to give away that first round pick in order to do it, but they had to do it because OKC is more than likely not going to play a single game with Kemba Walker on the roster. They're going to either have to move him to another team in which, hey, nobody really wants Kemba Walker's contract and nobody wants to deal with the injury proneness that is Kemba Walker right now. So even if he does play a game in an OKC uniform, it's purely to raise his trade value. He's not going to stay more than 1 season in OKC, and that's why that first round pick was included. Both teams accomplished exactly what they needed to in this trade. Kudos to Brad Stevens for understanding what his roster needs to move on from, and for getting some good players in return that can help Boston building a team moving forward. And kudos to Sam Presti for once again bringing in and being a good dealer for getting potentially another first-round pick, another couple first-round picks, depending on what they do with Kemba Walker, and trading away pieces in Al Horford and Moses Brown that they weren't necessarily fully using to the best of their capabilities. So both teams won this trade, in my opinion, and I don't see any reason why Boston lost this trade like people are saying that they have. Hey folks, thank you so much for listening to this segment from the Hard-Headed Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed this segment, make sure that you drop a like on the video and a comment. It helps me out a bunch. And if you're interested in watching more segments like this from the show after the show has been completed, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Once again, thank you so much for watching the video. My name is Nick Ryan, and I will see you all again very soon.